Hey guys, let's have a look at how you can manage your inventory in Ansible in a bit more detail in this section. If you remember from previous sections of this course, an inventory is a list of hosts that you manage using Ansible. The default inventory file is located in /etc/Ansible. So let's head back to the Ansible master system and let's type in sudo nano /etc/Ansible/hosts to open up the host file. Now this file has some nice explanation on how you can configure your inventory file. You can also go to the link I have provided with this lecture, and this link will take you to the official Ansible documentation. Now if you remember, we added our host in 3 groups: dev, prod and all. Now if we had more than one server in each group and those servers had a pattern in their host names, so let's say the server names are like this: dev1, dev2, dev3, dev4, etc. So the pattern here is 1, 2, 3, 4. We could use this pattern and add a range instead of adding each server as a separate entity. So we could type in dev and then square brackets and then 1 to 4 to specify all the 4 servers in the dev group. Now this pattern also takes alphabets, and you can also use colon to specify the pattern. These are all valid entries. Now let's say if you have a particular host where you want to run the Ansible scripts as a non-default user. So let's say by default you're running Ansible as user A on each remote machine, but for a particular host, let's say on the prod server, you want to run Ansible as, let's say, John Doe. Now to do that, you can just go to the host where you want to specify a user, type a space, and then after the space type in Ansible_user is equal to, and then the username. So let's say John Doe is the username. Now next, your company might be running SSH over a non-default port, which means any port other than port 22. In that scenario, to specify a non-default port for Ansible, you will go to the host where you want to specify the non-default port, type in a colon, and then type in the new port. And this way you can specify a non-default port for SSH communication. Now next, let's say you have a scenario where let's say on the dev box you have Ansible master running on the dev server, and also there's another application installed on the dev server which you want to manage through Ansible. Now in this scenario, Ansible will need to connect to the local host on the server in order to run those automation scripts. So you can utilize Ansible connection parameter in order to achieve that. So we can type in Ansible connection after the host name and then is equal to, and then local to specify that Ansible will need to be run locally on this machine. Now the other value you can give to connection local is SSH. Now next, you can also assign some host variables to each host in the inventory file. Now an example of why you would want to use host variables will be to set up things like application port numbers for a particular port. Now let's say you have Apache running on port 80 on one host and running on port 8080 on the other host. So let's say on the dev environment you have got Apache running on port 80, and in the prod server Apache is running on 8080. We can specify a variable, so let's call the variable http_port, and we can give it a value 80 for dev, and we can specify the same variable for the prod.testlog.com server as well, and for this server let's specify the value 8080. So this way you can assign host variables to each host in the inventory file. Now you might have a scenario where you want to assign variables to a group instead of a specific host. In order to do that, you can go to a new line, type in square brackets, and then inside square brackets, first you need to specify the group name, and then colon, and then vars, and this will tell Ansible that these are the variables that need to be assigned to a particular group, and in our case this group is dev. And you can assign the variable after this. So let's say we want to assign a proxy server to the dev environment, so proxy underscore server is equal to dev proxy dot testlab.com. Now we can do the same thing for the prod environment as well, so prod vars Now this way you can assign group variables. Now next, let's talk about supergroups. Supergroups contain multiple groups. So let's say you have a dev environment, a test environment, a prod and a staging environment. So dev, test, staging and prod, and the server in test environment is test1.testlab.com, and in the staging environment the server name is staging.testlab.com. Now let's say you want to create two supergroups, one supergroup with dev and test and one supergroup with staging and prod. So to create those supergroups which have multiple groups in them, you can type in square brackets and then the supergroup name. So let's call them lower environment and colon, and then we need to specify the suffix children, and then we need to specify the children of the lower environment supergroup, and the children are dev and test. Now let's specify the second supergroup, and let's call this upper environment, and we need to specify children suffix, and the upper environments are staging and prod. Now the main benefit of using supergroups is we can assign variables to these supergroups. So let's say both dev and test, which are the lower environments, have a common FTP server, and the upper environments have a common FTP server. So because we have supergroups, we can assign the FTP server to the supergroup, and this will in turn assign them to each group and then to each host in those groups. So let's do that. So to assign variables to a supergroup, we can first specify the supergroup name inside square brackets, so lower env, and then we can specify a colon and then vars, and here we can specify the variable, so ftp underscore server, and then is equal to, and let's give it the FTP server name IP address, and then for the upper environment we can specify variables as well, so FTP underscore server, so in this way you can create supergroups and assign variables to those supergroups. Now by default there are two groups that are always there in an inventory file. These are the group all and another group called ungrouped. Now you do not need to assign any host to these groups because the assignments are implicit, and all contains every host in your inventory file, and ungrouped contains all hosts that don't have any other group assigned aside from all. So you might have a situation where you have an all group and you have a server myserver.testlab.com, and this server is not assigned to any other group apart from all. So this server implicitly will be assigned to ungrouped. Every host will always belong to at least two groups. Therefore, because of this, myserver.testlab.com will be assigned to all and ungrouped. Now, next, you do not need to store your inventory in the default location, which is /etc/Ansible. So let's head out of our host file and let me show you how you can run your playbooks with the inventory file from a non-default location. But before that, let me show you how you will run your playbook when you have a default inventory file. In that case, you will just type in Ansible playbook and then you'll just type in the location of the inventory file. So let's say documents and then Ansible and then simple playbooks, and I think I've got a playbook called basic.yaml in here. If I run that, this will use the default inventory file to start the playbook. And as you can see, it has started this playbook basic.yaml with the default inventory file. So let's Control C and let's clear this. Now let's then copy our inventory file into a different folder. So copy /etc/Ansible/hosts and let's copy it to /downloads. Now let's go into downloads. So you got the host file here, which is a non-default location. Now in order to run our host file from a non-default location, we'll need to type in Ansible playbook, then -i to specify the location of inventory file, and then we can type in downloads/hosts, and then we can specify the location of our playbook. So in the previous command, let's just type in -i /hosts, and this will start the playbook from inventory file in a non-default location. So this way you can use a non-default location for your inventory file. With this, we've come to the end of this long lecture. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye.